Welcome, members, to another episode of From the Archives. My name is Lesley Jones, and I am the Collections and Archives Manager at the History Center. In these episodes, I will be taking you into the archives and sharing items with you that have a fascinating history behind them. Today, we have another very special two-part episode about pieces from a landmark on the square, the Dixie Hunt Hotel. In part one, we will talk about the history of the Dixie Hunt Hotel, about the artifact, and about the original owner of this item, Mr. Johnny Godfrey Jr. In northeast Georgia during the 1830s, the gold rush was in full swing. Land was being purchased left and right in hopes of striking it rich. A Frenchman named Adolfus D'Auvergne decided he too wanted to search for gold, and in the early 1830s, bought the land of James Law for $6,000. That's almost $200,000 today. Well, after a few years of letdowns and the unfortunate news of the death of Mr. D'Auvregne's wife, he left Georgia and sold the land. The new owners wanted to build a hotel on that land and called it the Arlington Hotel. Wealthy real estate mogul James Helm Hunt and his wife Aurora owned a chain of hotels around Georgia and decided to buy the Arlington Hotel. It was then they renamed the building the Dixie Hunt Hotel. Census records indicate that out of all the hotels that Mr. and Mrs. Hunt owned, they lived at the Dixie Hunt in Gainesville. James Helm Hunt passed away in 1925, and his wife Aurora passed in 1927. They are interred at the Alta Vista Cemetery in Gainesville. What is fascinating about this hotel is that upon Mrs. Hunt's passing in 1927, her will stated that the building would now be owned by her alma mater, Brenau University. Brenau owned the hotel for over 40 years before selling it in 1969. And according to Deborah Prince Kroll, the granddaughter of Jessie Jewell, Mr. Jewell owned the Dixie Hunt at some point as well. The Norton Agency bought the building in 1981 and turned it into the Hunt Tower, an office building that still exists today. It is one of the only Art Deco buildings still standing in Georgia and is on the National Registry of Historic Places. The artifact we have today is a city directory from 1955. It's in great condition and is a treasure trove of 1950s history. This type of directory would have been placed within a room at the Dixie Hunt Hotel for guests to use as needed. The directory was somehow acquired by Mr. Johnny Godfrey Jr. and has many notes within the pages. I think my favorite has to be within the first page of the directory. The Sheriff's Department gave their direct lines to speak to them, and Mr. Godfrey has written the numbers for the Atlanta Journal and various others. In researching Mr. Johnny Hayward Godfrey, I found him to be quite an interesting fellow. His father, Godfrey Sr., worked for the Gainesville Midland Railroad. In another episode, we will share the railroad artifacts of Mr. Godfrey Sr. Godfrey Jr. went into the Navy and became a hurricane hunter. According to an article written by Lieutenant Commander Wycliffe D. Toole, a hurricane hunter's mission was to seek out, track, and penetrate the worst of nature's weather phenomena. Through aerial reconnaissance, officers like Mr. Godfrey would fly into a storm in order to gather information that could help the military predict hurricanes. After serving 6 years, Mr. Godfrey returned to Gainesville and lived with his wife Nadine and their 2 children until his passing in 2015. Mr. Godfrey is interred at Memorial Park Cemetery in Gainesville. In part 2 of the Dixie Hunt Hotel, we will be talking about the amenities there, including the barbershop and some history about the donor of the artifact, a pillar of the community, Mr. P. Martin Ellard. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of From the Archives. It's because of members like you that we get the opportunity to delve into the research on these amazing objects. I'd like to thank the Digital Library of Georgia, the Gainesville Times, Benjamin Barton at the Brenau Archives, and Miss Deborah Prince Kroll. Please comment if you have any questions about the Dixie Hunt Hotel or about what artifacts we have here at the History Center.